Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you. You guys, we do a life consulting master class. It is a 1 year, 2 year, or 3 year school, depending on how many you want to do with us.
Yeah.
And it's a part-time school. It's hardcore. There's tons of curriculum. There's things that you read. There's things that you watch. There's things that you listen to. There's discussion groups. There's teaching. There's activation. There's
tons of live consulting.
Yeah. And practice. Lots of things where you're practicing. There's homerooms where you are in a group with each other. There's group consulting that you do. It's a beautiful space to know each other and go on a deep heart journey, and people's lives transform. And if you are interested in doing that, it is a great way if you want to get into a career helping people. Pietze and Jonny went through their own deep heart process. And because they went through their own deep heart process, they now can be consultants and thrive. And people who go on their own heart process, all of the people we know that have done that have ended up with waiting lists. If they want to do this as a career and they actually do the work themselves, they find a map on this journey. We teach about the body, the mind, the emotions, how to deal with them, everything from how to deal with them in conflict, how to deal with them with your beliefs, how to transform your life. If that's interesting to you, we have everybody go through the pathway to freedom in order to get ready for that. Yeah. It is much easier if you do the pathway to freedom before, so that you are biting off pieces a little bit at a time. Yeah. And if you do the pathway to freedom and you sign up for the school, you get the pathway to freedom free.
And if you're not sure that you want to be a consultant, but you want to be a better leader and stuff in your environment, this is going to change your entire life, and you're going to be a better leader in your environment, being it like a parent or, whatever.
It'll transform your life.
Yeah. So we do have very limited spots inside of that. And there is a full application process that you go through. So and interviews and stuff like that. So you can go to Justin and Abby, that's abi.com, and you can click under our courses and you can find that life consulting masterclass and the pathway to freedom.
I will say is we have completely changed the school this year.
Yeah.
And we have been creating handouts and teachings that are so beautiful. And I feel so excited about the clarity. Next year will be the best year we've ever done the school because we fine-tuned a lot of the things each year.
Yeah. It'll probably just get better every year.
So good.
Yeah, but I actually think this is the most significant change because we're completely switching a few things.
So great. So exciting.
It's super fun. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, people have been asking us, what's it practically like to be an LCMC? And so recently we did a mini conference on validation. And in one of our sessions, we had some incredible encounters, and there was a lot of wonderful information that was deposited. And we thought, hey, you know what? We're going to make this specific session available for free for anyone who wants to get a deeper feeling for what LCMC is. You can click on the link in the description of this episode, and you'll be able to get that session for free. And if you're having any problems with that, you can also email us at yesplease@stumblconsulting.com, and we will send you a link to that episode, and you can watch it, have your own personal experience with it, and get some profound information out of our validation session from that mini conference. So, hey, with that said, what are we doing today,
Okay,
kids?
I'm really excited because we recorded last week an episode about being regulated as parents and how important that is for the nervous system of the family. And me and Justin left that podcast so jazzed.
Yeah, and I was profoundly impacted.
You really were.
Yeah.
Do you want to share about?
I think that there was even the descriptions of how Pietze and Jonny, especially even Pietze, was sharing some of her stories of regulation and helping to regulate the kids and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, wow, I could feel, I know this sounds weird, but the little kid inside of me and feeling the impact of the stories and like, oh, I can feel that kind of attunement from that mothering that I heard in that space. It was really powerful. So thank you for that.
I think when you hear what safe could be like, there's something in your soul that feels relieved. And you can realize, like, sometimes just hearing what healthy co-regulation in family looks like, you recognize, oh, that's why I struggle with regulating, because I never experienced that. So I think this episode's going to be so encouraging, whether you're a parent or you're just somebody who's on the emotional health journey and you want to understand more about yourself and what healthy looks like for the future.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say, like, I think as we've talked through the subject of how to regulate your kid, a lot of what we pull on is how we've learned to regulate our inner kids ourselves, right? So even if you don't have kids, there's tons of crossover here. Like, take this and visualize yourself as that little kid and apply it to yourself.
It's really good. So this is just going to be story hour, where Pietze and Jonny share stories of walking stuff through with their kids, and then we kind of comment and teach about it.
Yeah. And we're going to start with a really fun story.
Real doozy.
Really fun, because we just are gluttons for punishment. So here we go. No, we had gone on.
Well, I do want to say, before we jump into the story, I just want to remind parents what we're talking about when we talk about regulation. Yeah, and I think it'd be good to go back and listen to the last two podcasts just to really understand it. But, regulation has to do with our internal nervous system and how we perceive threat, whether we feel safe or whether we feel threatened. And constantly our bodies and our minds, our nervous system is taking in data to understand, is this a safe situation or is this a threatening situation? Now, specifically in kids, they are, because of how attachment works, kids are biologically geared to look to their parents and read their facial expression and cues and their energetic nervous system to understand if they feel safe about a situation. That's why when a baby falls down, they're learning to walk and they fall down.
They look at you.
Immediately they find their parent's face to go, am I safe? Am I okay? And to have a sense of security. Okay, mom is right there. Dad's right there. I feel safe, I love even the analogy of in the Bible, how, the scripture about God making his face to shine upon us. It's actually a scripture to me about regulation, that when we see the smile of God over us, that it's a cue of safety.
It reminds us that we're safe.
You're safe. I'm proud of you. I see you. I'm with you.
It's really good.
Yeah. And so when we're talking about kids and regulation, a lot of times, when parents come to me, I work with a lot of parents, and when they come to me saying, oh, my kid is doing this and my kid is doing that, and we can't get this under control. Most bad behavior, I kind of feel, I'm kind of going out on a limb here, but I really do believe this. Most bad behavior is actually tied to dysregulation in the child. And when that nervous system and that threat response goes off, oftentimes for kids, it results in the negative behavior that you see. And so before we dealing with just the behavior would be like chopping off a weed, like mowing a weed.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. You might stop the behavior in the short term, but you've done nothing. All you've done is completely cut off that weed, and it's going to grow right back. And so the conversation then becomes about, how do we regulate a child in order to get their best foot forward in life, in order to see that child again that we know is in there underneath all the bad behavior and all the big emotions. How do we get to that child? And really the conversation doesn't become about controlling behavior. Right. The behavior, once we get the regulation under control, the behavior tends to follow suit. And it doesn't mean that we don't use different tools or tactics and boundaries. That definitely is part of it. But really the main conversation becomes about regulation.
Yeah. And what happens is, I watched this video on Instagram the other day, and she explained it so well. She's like, you can punish your kids out of their emotions, but it's not that you trained them how to get through emotions.
I was just going to bring this up. Yeah. That's good.
It's that you taught them to dissociate from their emotions.
Yeah. Right.
So they will never have the tools to know how to go through emotions.
Yeah.
Yes. So like you can train kids to not feel. Yeah. But that will end up creating where they feel emotionally inept their whole life.
Yes.
Where they feel emotionally overwhelmed, where they have to stay locked down.
Yes.
You've trained compliance and numbness. So like a lot of parents will say, but my kids are good and I I don't help them with their emotions at all. And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of kids that want to make you happy.
That have learned, kids are geared to want to please their parents.
Yes.
They actually naturally want to please their parents. And so, yeah, oftentimes if the kid isn't feeling an emotion, yeah, they're compliant. They've learned how to be compliant. And one of the things Jonny and I talk about is having emotional distress tolerance or resilience for life. And a lot of people think that resilience is the lack of feeling an emotion. If I don't feel emotions, I'm then resilient.
Oh, really? I thought this my whole life. I was like, I can push through anything. Yeah. I can numb out. I can dissociate. Look at me. I'm so strong. I'm not affected by anything.
Totally. And the truth is that all that's doing is staying stuck in an emotion. Resilience, an emotional distress tolerance and resilience actually comes from the ability to move through an emotion. Yes. To not stay stuck in it, to be able to process it, to then appropriately work through it and put it in its place. And that's really what resilience is. And that's what we're going for with kids. It's not, not creating these resilient kids that don't feel their emotions, but actually the ability to work through them, to not be afraid.
Yeah, real resilience.
Yeah.
Well, and resilience is also our ability to learn to connect to safety.
Yeah.
So we have to understand our emotions and understand our beliefs. This is what we go through in Pathway. Pathway is really like Pathway to Resilience. We could rename it. Because the idea is the more you learn what emotions you're feeling, what's going on in your body, and what beliefs are connected, then you can learn what safety do I need to connect to? And how do I get safe again?
Yeah.
So that, because the more you're connected to safety and your emotions, resilience is that feeling of like, I can get through this.
Right.
So many people are terrified of facing their past or facing their feelings because they're like, I'm going to get overwhelmed and it's going to shut me down.
Right.
But there is a way that you can actually learn the skills that you weren't taught. Like I've had to relearn so many emotional habits. But that's the beautiful thing is that I get to reparent myself and I get to be kind with myself and I get to train myself how to regulate when I didn't know that.
Well, and a lot of people think, and I want to say this too, because oftentimes when I'm first kind of introducing parents to this concept, a lot of times there's usually one parent that's like, yeah, but what about discipline? What about them actually just doing what I say?
What I need them to do.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember that that's actually the key, is that we're actually getting kids regulated where they're in a spot where they're focused, they're calm. That's where they can learn. Kids naturally want to please their parents. We're building a heart-to-heart connection so kids aren't just doing it because mom and dad said so. They're doing it because they understand how the ecosystem of the family works and they know how to fit into that. And, I think sometimes...
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
What's the long-term payoff of that? Because I think that like what you're talking about in that moment, what is the ripple effect?
Yeah. So
10 years.
You can raise your kids with just boundaries. Okay.
Yeah.
Or just punishment or just, do this because I said so. You can totally do it. And you will probably have, like we were saying, very compliant kids. Right. However, given a child's personality, they get to 16 or 17 and go, oh, okay, there's two ways to do this. There's your way and there's my way. And I like my way better. And now you can try to use that, I'm the parent, just do it. But at this point, you're raising close to an adult who actually is coming into their own autonomy. You've completely lost control. On the flip end, if you flip this around and start to parent from a heart-to-heart connection, where your kids, because what we're trying to do here is build trust with our kids, that they trust us. You're safe with me. I care about you. This is where your needs will get met. It's also where your boundaries will be found.
Yes.
When we create that safety between parent and child, we're creating that lifelong relationship that they will actually come to you looking for safety and resource and parenting for the rest of their life.
But not only that, I want to talk scientifically. When you are regulated, your brain, when you're dysregulated, you think black and white.
Yeah.
You think very rigid.
Yes.
You think you are closed to options. Your relationship circuits are off. So if you train your kids to regulate, when they're without you and they know how to regulate, they'll make better decisions.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So when they get dysregulated because there's a bunch of peer pressure happening, but they know their emotions and they know how to regulate through them, they can get their brain back online. Most bad decisions are made in a dysregulated state.
Right.
I might even say all, but I don't want to get too certain there. But
yeah,
I would say most likely if you're making a decision that hurts you, you're in a triggered state to do it. And so if you can learn to regulate, your child has a better chance as they grow. It doesn't mean they won't ever we're all freaking messy humans. We're all going to be messy together on a planet where there's lots of pain and we're in self-protection.
Yes.
But I would want my kids' brains to be able to be online.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
And that when you learn in Pathways, you learn the science.
Yeah.
You know, I will say too, something that is important to note is that in this, you know, I think easily there's so much parenting advice out there right now. Mm-hmm. You know, you go on social media and it's like, you know, you're just jam-packed with so much parenting advice. And what we're saying here is this is not a soft approach. You know, I think sometimes we can go into, and really what we will paint for you here is the balance between the two. You need attunement. Your kids need attunement and compassion and secure attachment as much as they need boundaries.
Boundaries create security.
Absolutely.
And stability.
Absolutely. And a lot of times we want to make it about one or the other. We either want to go, oh my gosh, we're just creating compassion and safety. But if you don't have boundaries, then the kid goes, basically what it feels like is that they're the captain steering the ship.
Yes.
And
that's overwhelming.
Yeah, it becomes overwhelming. It's like, you know, if you were scared of flying and you get on a flight and the captain comes over and says, and you're like, I don't want any turbulence. I'll be fine as long as there's no turbulence. And you start to feel turbulence. And the captain gets on and says, okay, so we're experiencing turbulence and I'm a little bit freaked out right now. In fact, I'm really freaked out right now that there's turbulence.
We're all going to die.
Yeah, we're going to die. What's that going to do to you?
Right.
Oh, you're going to go, oh my gosh,
panic.
I'm terrified. I need to take over this situation. But if the pilot goes, hey, we're experiencing some turbulence, we'll be fine. I know how to navigate this turbulence. Just
make
keep
sure you put on your seatbelt.
Put on your seatbelt.
Right,
sit down.
Sit down. Obey the boundaries and we'll be safe and we'll be fine. You go, oh, okay. And even having the boundary makes you go, okay, they're doing things to keep me safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
you know, and so we really need both here.
And again, your nervous system needs cues of safety for your whole life. And so without boundaries, it's a danger cue.
Yes.
With boundaries, without compassion, it's a danger cue.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
it's the goal is to learn both. And we're going to give you some practical examples. Let's roll.
Let's roll. So I think a good one to start off with is one where it was maybe a little more messy. Because I think it's kind of relatable, right?
Well, and the goal, do you want to share your goal is when you're messy, just to be a good enough parent?
Yeah, to be good enough parent. It's not that you're perfect, but that it's that you come back, you take ownership with your kids, you identify what happened. And all of that, why it's so important is because those are teaching moments and they're gold teaching moments.
Well, and I would say that the goal is that sometimes when you realize a new concept, when you take it in and you gain vision for it, there's a big difference between your real life and the vision that you have, right?
And this I'm going to be so regulated and help my kids so much.
Exactly. And we're going to value regulation above everything else, you know, and then you're in the middle of this story and it's a lot more gray than that. It's a lot less
more
black and white.
Than
you know,
that.
There's good moments and there's really hard moments.
100%.
It's really good.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah. So this last winter, we normally take our family vacation in January, and leading up to this family vacation where we were going to go to Disneyland, road trip out to Disneyland, we had just a crazy 6 months. I mean, it was like one of those seasons where we describe where it's like thing after thing hitting us where we can't get our heads above water.
Yes.
To the point where like the month before we left, I literally got a back injury where I couldn't move for like 4 weeks. And Jonny was like taking care of the kids, working, sometimes having to like pick me up and maneuver me. It was horrible.
It was rough. You couldn't do anything.
Sex was weird.
Well, there was no sex.
No comment.
No comment. It's like having sex with a dead fish.
This has really gone into an interesting area.
Anywho,
so it was a devastating time for Jonny.
Yeah.
Great. So here we go to Disneyland.
For Jonny. So we were like, you know what? We really shouldn't take a vacation. Like we just shouldn't do this. We should stay home. We should probably regulate. And then we got to thinking and we were like, you know, just maybe this vacation might be exactly what we need.
Well, yeah. And I think for a lot of families, it's really real where you've booked your time off.
Yep.
You have your passes. They expire at a certain point. You have everything lined up, you know, and then Pietze throws her back out a month before and you know what I mean? And you can't just back out of things.
It's the point of no return, right?
Right. There is a point of no return.
Yeah.
And so then this question of regulation becomes a lot more complicated because theoretically it probably wouldn't have been a good idea for us to go when we went.
Right.
But, you know, and
there's a lot of details.
Yes. And you find yourself in these torn places and then it unravels.
So
here we go.
We decided let's take a chance and go on the vacation. My back will be fine. We'll be fine. We got this. You know, never mind the stress of having a broken back and trying to pack up the kids and get off the door.
We had this vision of sunshine and rest.
And regulation.
So
we
beautiful.
Get on the road and day one is fine, whatever. We wake up day 2, realize that we forgot something incredibly vital to the trip. I wake up literally.
Freak out.
We wake up feeling panicked because we had such a hard 6 months, our nervous systems, and this is important to know, is that what can lead to like staying in a state of dysregulation, or some people might call it a triggered state, where you can't come down, is when you have chronic stress over and over again. It can actually dysregulate the nervous system to where everything begins to feel threatening. The brain thinks everything is threatening. It's constantly on high alert. So for us, forgetting this thing that we needed, which normally would have been inconvenient, overwhelming, suddenly felt like we were going to have panic attacks about it.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah, because you were at your capacity. You have no emotional margin. You already had gone through thing after thing after thing after thing. Your nervous system is like, I can't handle one more thing.
100%. That should have been our first cue to not take the vacation. Like if everything has to go perfect in order for it to be good, probably not a good time to take it when you're with kids. So we're panicked about it. It's like this huge miracle story where I like jump into action and I like solve the problem. And I'm so excited. And I'm like, Jonny, look at what God did. Like he solved this problem for us. And as soon as I'm saying this to him, like a snowstorm hits and he's like white knuckling it on the road and he's completely gone. Like at this point, you were gone. Like you were stressed. You were overwhelmed. The kids are now starting to lose it in the back because we all know how that goes, right? Like they are not aware. They
feel you.
They can feel us. Exactly.
Yes.
They can feel that they're stressed. So they're getting anxious, which then makes them want more attention from us. You know? So we have this
which then feels more stressful for you.
Oh, way more stressful. So we come out of the mountains, roll out into this town, and we're both.
Well, and by this time we're fighting. You know, I mean, not fighting, but we are arguing. We are not doing well emotionally.
Yeah, it's more like pointed conversation, I would say. Very pointed, because we're with our kids. So we hadn't completely lost it this time. It's more like, you know, it didn't feel good. Well, he's like, well, I'm kind of trying here to not drive us off the side of the road. You know, those kind of things.
Yep.
But the tension is building, right?
Yes.
And so we pull over to the Starbucks. You get out of the car.
Well, I'm just trying to calm down at this point. And I think throughout this whole process, if you had been with us, at moments you would have probably thought we were the worst people. And at moments you probably would have really admired us because you know, in the search of getting to a regulated home, it is really important to pull yourself aside when you're not doing well. Like,
so good, Jonny.
You have to pull yourself aside and try to calm down. And we both did this throughout this process multiple times unsuccessfully, right? It's not always successful, but your goal is always to get back to that regulated state.
And so if we're in moments of dysregulation, that's a cue to us to stop and pause and wait till we get regulated again or till the child is regulated again before we continue on with what we're doing.
But when you're on a road trip, there's a certain extent to which how much you can stop.
We've stopped every 3 minutes.
We were that dysregulated.
Well, especially in Utah, we're driving across
when
Utah.
It's snowing.
There's nothing out there. There's no towns to stop at.
Yeah. So we stop at this town, and Jonny, I think you had snapped on Moses. And
yeah, I snapped at one of the kids at one point because they were being noisy.
Yep. And which is very understandable.
Your nervous system was already at capacity before the trip. Now there's a snowstorm.
And you blow the cork.
Yeah.
So he snaps on one of the kids and gets out of the car and is all dysregulated. And I go from like, oh, my feelings are hurt.
Mama bear switched
dysregulated to like, oh, hell no. You will not yell at my babies. You will not disrespect me. This is not going to happen.
This has got to be so familiar.
I will take control of this situation. So he goes into the Starbucks. I'm like, you need to go take a minute. That worked real well. That was great. That was one of my finer
It really
moments.
Helped him regulate, didn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it really helped him calm down, and I felt so compassionate towards him.
Yeah, if you're out there, if you're out there and you have a husband who struggles with dysregulation, yelling at him to get regulated is really helpful. So try it. It works.
Pro tip
here from the experts.
Try it. If it works, take pathways. Just kidding.
So he goes in, he gets back in the car. Of course, I tried to get regulated, but now in retrospect realized I was not fully regulated, and neither was he. And that really is key, is getting fully regulated. Usually doesn't work when you think you're kind of regulated. Sometimes that can work out. Most of the time it doesn't.
Well, and that's one of the areas we went wrong that first stop. This is where you see the importance of not being too busy in all of your life for living a regulated life, because there will be interruptions where you have to stop and slow down. And really what we should have done, I'm visualizing this story in my head as she's telling it. I can picture where we were at that first stop. And I'm like, there were 7 restaurants we could have gone to for a sit-down lunch right there. And we could have had a nice cup of coffee, reset our kids, played a card game at the table with our kids, maybe got a dessert at the end of our lunch, and we're all happy. And we didn't need to be to our hotel early that night.
So
the drive to keep moving, right? That busyness, that like we got to get there, we got to go.
Such a good point.
We cut short before we were regulated.
That is a huge source of dysregulation for most people. We've had that fight so many times in our marriage. And the thing is, if you don't take the time to, it would have taken you less time to regulate at a restaurant if you would have just taken an hour to like calm down than it did to get regulated the rest of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. You start
it always works that way. It saves time to take time.
It's so you're so much better off just abandoning what your goal is in your head and abandoning a relationship with time in situations like this, because it's true. You can only create more chaos for yourself trying to hit that goal.
Well, and really what you see, what we were talking about yesterday, is we were in a form of resistance to the situation. We kept trying to like resist that this was happening and this is where we are at, rather than just accepting it. This is where we're at. Now, then from there, you can problem solve.
This trip is not as easy as we thought it was going to be. We're going to accept that, rather than we have to keep going. We got to get to the pool early because we were going to swim and it's going to be fun and it's going to be great. And that's the vision. Just accepting it's hard.
Yeah, that's good.
We did not accept.
We did not accept, and we did not get regulated.
In resistance, and we got in the car. And I turned to Jonny and I'm like, I am not going to do this trip with you. I can get to this very calm, but like, I'm not
nice. The calm F you.
The calm F you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not going to do this trip with you like this. So if you cannot get regulated, we're not going to have this trip. That's how I entered the repair.
You're like, I'm regulated. I'll start with this.
That had to set the kids on fire too.
Oh yeah. Just so then at this point, our daughter, who has anxiety about plans changing, is now like, are we not going to go on the vacation? Mom of the Year award. I completely dysregulated everyone. Yeah. And so we pull over again. We literally went from the Starbucks to get on the interstate and went over the interstate to the other parking lot of a coffee shop and have the next conversation. So we get out of the car. Jonny gets out of the car and the kids are now upset. And I'm like, okay. I take a second, I take a deep breath. And this is where I did actually accept the situation. Because I think I was like, whoa, I am a huge contributor here to the unsafety of this entire situation.
Well, because Yana mirrored for you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's exactly what we were talking about in the last couple of podcasts. But, you know, at that point, my indicator of seeing my kids completely dysregulated and upset and scared, they are mirroring back to me where I was. And sometimes that mirror is actually so helpful if you can see it as a mirror, because it's your cue to stop and reset yourself.
Yes.
You know? And so they were mirroring back to me exactly what I was doing and that fear and that unsafety. And so I stopped. I accepted the situation. I took some deep breaths. And then I turned around and I was like, hey, guys, how are you feeling? And they were like, are we going to still go to Disneyland? Are we? And I'm like, yes, we are. I know that mommy and daddy are upset right now, huh? Yeah, you guys are really upset. And Moses is so articulate. He's like, well, I just think that you guys are very stressed out. And I don't like it when you guys are stressed. Like, he's going on this whole thing. I'm like, yes, honey, you are right. We are stressed out and it doesn't feel good. That feels horrible, huh? Mommy and daddy, you know, sometimes you guys are grouchy and mommy and daddy say, hey, you need to take some deep breaths and turn into a calm spot. That's what we say. Go from your frustration into a calm spot. Mom and dad need to do that too. And that's what we're taking time to do. And when I was in my angry spot, I said some things that I did not mean. And so did daddy. Have you ever done that? And they're like, yeah. So, you know, Yana's like, yes. I'm like, that's what mommy and daddy did. And I was like, you know what? It's going to be okay, guys. Let's take some deep breaths. And so they took deep breaths and I was like, we're going to be okay. Mom and dad are going to be okay. You guys are good. And so I was like,
and we're going to make it to Disneyland.
Yeah, we're going to make it to Disneyland. Nobody's turning around. You know, you really know you're winning as a parent when you pull out the empty threats. You know?
Totally.
I'm just trying to intimidate you into obeying or intimidate you into doing what I want. So,
well, and I think at the same time, because you're in the car at that time, I'm outside of the car trying to calm down my own freak out, going through my heart steps, right? Of
the
feeling what pathway. I'm feeling. And then I'm even connecting to one thing I always try to do in conflict is I know that there's always something that I can own, and there's something that I can own genuinely. Like there's always something you can connect to. Okay, I wish I wouldn't have yelled at Moses. Yeah. Start there, because I can really genuinely own that. You know, I think I was frustrated in the conversation because I was putting up my, you can't ever let me be grouchy about stuff. I just want to be a human kind of thing, which is not really something that you can be mad at. Like in that moment, I'm not going to make a fight for that because that's a conversation for outside of that moment. In that moment, I'm just trying to simply get regulation back in the picture and connect to what I did wrong,
right? That
I can own, right? So getting myself regulated and connecting to how to clean up the mess that my dysregulation caused.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And what you're thinking, when you come up with a thing to genuinely own, what that's doing is creating a cue of safety for everyone.
Yes.
So when we own something that we just did, we're acknowledging reality about how what we did affected somebody.
Yes.
And then we are creating a safe place. People know that their experience matters, that their feelings matter, and that you are not just going to be out of control.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and I think that even in that moment, and this is something that I was doing before that, but the deception in those moments is that you want to fix the problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if there's something that you've done that's hurt the other person, it's really hard to apologize to them if you haven't fixed it or if you don't have the solution already.
Yep.
And the deception is that that's actually necessary, because in reality, what you can do, and what I did in that moment, one of the things I did was say, hey, I'm sorry that I'm acting the way that I am. I can't figure out how to get regulated right now.
We call that narrating.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of the simplest tools that no one's ever taught you.
Totally.
Which is just to narrate where you're at.
Exactly what's going on internally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he even did take ownership. Like, I am sorry. I know that my dysregulation is affecting you, affecting the kids. I can't figure out how to get fully regulated right now. And even that simple piece of ownership was so helpful, you know, just owning the reality. And so I came in and owned my reality as well, and just said, and also I'm dysregulated as well. And I said things like, I acted towards you in a way that would have felt so scary and so unsafe when you were already feeling unsafe and overwhelmed. And I'm really sorry. Like, I should have pulled back. I could have been a calming presence, and instead I was a scary presence to you.
Yeah. And if you're a step beyond that, because we did that with each other, but a thing that we've both gotten really in the habit of is apologizing to our kids.
It's amazing. And
you have to have that if you're going to have a regulated home with your kids.
And one thing
you have to get really comfortable with being humble with your kids.
Yeah. And one thing that we do with each other, and we did with our kids, so we made up, and well, I will say this. One thing that we do is that we always say, if I could go back and do it differently, here's how I would have wanted to do it, and here's how I would have wanted you to feel.
I love this.
That's powerful.
Yeah. Because basically what we're saying is, I'm human and I fell short, but here's my intention. Here's what I would want you to feel, and here's how I would have wanted. And so it's not saying I'm not human. It's actually fully accepting your humanity, but creating a safe space within it. And so when we got back in the car.
Well, yeah, because in regulation, when that regulation is broken, you actually, the anchor point of your life, if that's the other person, if your kid's anchor point is you as a parent, coming back in and owning that and creating safety for them, it allows them to actually relax back into safety, right? Because what you're saying is my heart is not this. My love towards you is not this. This is my humanity. This is where I went wrong. Because if you don't do that step and things just go back to being normal, like if you just dissociate from it and things just go back to being normal, and there's no conversation with your kids over why you yelled at them and why you're sorry about it, okay? They get this weird bipolar view of you as a parent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it really messes you up.
Well, and not only that, just like you have to unwind your nervous system, you have to go back and unwind your kid's nervous system after dysregulation happened. And that's very important. Recognizing what is going on with them and understanding how to pivot and help them unwind. And so immediately when we got back in the car.
Let me add one quick thing before getting back in the car. Because, even in this ownership piece element that you're bringing into it, what you're doing is setting a long-term example of like, it's actually safe to take ownership. So, oftentimes parents live like, because of not wanting to look wrong or shame or, like not humbling themselves to do those actions, they create an environment of denial. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so later on, a kid screws up and makes a mess, and all they know is our culture in this family is denial. And so I'm going to hold fast to denial when I'm making messes. And instead, again, you model this whole idea of ownership, and the kid goes, "Oh yeah, that's a safe thing to do.
Yes.
That repairs connection.
Yes.
We work through things really well. So I'm going to take ownership in the future." It's
well, and that's
brilliant.
a really
awesome.
big deal what you just said, Justin, because one of the things that we talk about and help parents with is that we don't hold our kids to a standard that we're not holding ourselves to.
Yes.
So, and we model that standard for them. So I want my kids to be really good at taking ownership when they've misstepped or their emotions have affected and made affected other people or made a mess. Yeah. And so I am going to model that for them every time. And as well as when I am holding my kids to a standard, I am modeling that I am doing that with myself as well. This is the standard in our family.
Yes.
If you make a mess, you clean it up. Always. Yeah. You always come back and repair. I'm going to do that with Dad. Dad's going to do that with me. We're going to do that with you guys. And we want you guys to do that with us.
Yeah.
You know, and so it becomes a lot easier to hold your kids to a standard when you've modeled that standard for them and everybody's sticking to the same standard.
Yes.
You know, and so,
can you give us an example like of what you would say to say, I wouldn't have wanted, or how you said
with
that?
The kids.
So like I do this all the time with Moses because him and I are best buddies, and also I get mad at him a lot, you know. So
you guys are like oil and water in some ways.
Yep.
We are. And so, you know, I will lean in, like in that situation, we get back in the car and I'll lean in and I'll be like, hey, it is not okay that Daddy did that. Daddy should not have yelled at you. That's never okay. Daddy was really frustrated. Are you okay? How are you feeling? Then obviously Moses is going to be quiet and Yana's not going to say anything.
Well, no, but he is actually good. Once he opens up, he just says, well, I just feel like it's really hard when you guys get upset at each other and it makes me feel really overwhelmed. Like he'll say stuff like that. And we're like, yeah, buddy.
And you got to validate that. You got to imagine yourself as a kid sitting in the car with your parents yelling at each other.
Yeah.
And say, yeah, I'm sure that felt really awful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I would have felt overwhelmed too.
Yeah.
And then what would you say like you'd want for him or your intention?
So I would come in and say, I don't ever want to yell at you like that. That's not okay. Good. That's not okay for me to ever do that. And if I could go back, I would not have yelled at you. It's never okay for me to yell at you like that. And I'm, you know, just very simple. That's the thing as well. And you know, it depends on your kid and their age and where they're at. But you got to think in the situation, okay, what is the message that I want them to be walking away from this conversation with? And oftentimes what I will do is I will start with that message. And then if there's dialogue back and forth, I will circle back and end with that message as well.
Yeah.
Right. So if I'll say that and then he'll come back and be like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. And then he might blow it out of proportion. And I'll be like, well, okay, Moses, I know you're feeling overwhelmed. It's not okay that I did that. I'm going to try really hard to not do that in the future. A lot of times I'll make a statement of intent for the future. I'm working really hard on this in myself. I'm really trying to learn how to calm myself down, to take deep breaths, the same thing that we tell you to do. Oftentimes we'll even tie it back to the language that we're using with them around flexible thinking, black and white thinking, when the storm comes, right? And so even in that moment, oftentimes we'll tie it back and say, hey, Daddy was being an oak tree there. Daddy was being rigid. I didn't take a moment to take a deep breath, right? That kind of talk. And it's very helpful if you're having those type of conversations with them outside of moments.
Yeah.
because
then there's language existing that they know.
Common language.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And you've already
something that I'm
them.
noticing.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Something I'm noticing that you guys do a lot, which I think is so important, is you're teaching empathy as you go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like, I did this. Do you know what it feels like to yell even though you didn't mean to hurt someone's feelings? Or do you know what it feels like? To, like, you're constantly helping them imagine what it's like to be have you, compassion. And you imagine what it's like to be them.
Yeah, and have compassion for their humanity. Like, that's human, and sometimes you do that.
It's
and
very human to get frustrated.
Yeah. And one thing that I do a lot too, and I've heard Jonny do this too with the kids, is I'll come back and say, you know what? I could have done that differently. I yelled at you, but I actually, if I had been taking my deep breaths and gotten back to my calm spot, I could have said that in a way kinder way. And I'm really sorry. And the reason that I say that exact phrase is because when we are doing repair with our kids and getting them back to regulation, I will use that exact same phrase. You could have done this differently. Let me show you how. Let me give you a different option of how you could have done this differently.
Because you want to teach your kids how they could do it differently. So you want to model that you yourself. Yes. And to me, that's a huge part of cleanup. Yes. Is I'm not only thinking through what I did, I'm thinking through how I could have done it differently.
Yes.
Because that's helping my brain engage the future.
Absolutely.
And it can be a really good teaching moment as well, I will pull in examples where they have been dysregulated similarly. Like, you know, we had one recently where I said something to Moses that was frustrated, and it was just because I was hungry. I had a blood sugar drop. That's literally all it was. And he's like, are you overwhelmed? He asked me. This is a couple days ago. And I took a breath because I realized he's feeling my energy. I said, hey, buddy, so sorry. I'm actually really hungry right now. And he didn't quite get it. And so I was like, do you remember the other day when you got really mad at me right before bed? And you were really sleepy and you were like so grouchy. And he's like, oh, yeah. I'm like, that's kind of what it's like for me when I get hungry. You didn't do anything wrong. I love you, but it's still not okay. I shouldn't act like that. And it's even, and then I used it, I turned it as a teaching moment for him. And I said, even like how I said when you were being grouchy before bed, it's okay that you're tired, but you need to try to be kind in the way you're communicating, right? So there's a lot in those moments. If you're able to,
those gold moments.
Yeah.
We call them the gold moments because they're the moments that happen naturally where you are taking something that you could have easily skipped past because of your own shame.
Not forcing something that's not there.
We're not forcing something. We're using a moment where our humanity came out to actually create connection and teaching moments with our kids. And that is so important.
Yeah.
It breaks pedestal ideas and it breaks like dictatorship ideas and unhealthy authority, and it makes connection and common humanity the center. And what that does is that makes you not feel like you're on the outside for being messy or a mistake. It doesn't make you feel like you will get left behind if you do something wrong. It makes you feel like actually me and dad both make mistakes. So now when Moses gets grumpy, he remembers that also dad gets grumpy. So he remembers I'm not alone. I'm not the one person that gets grumpy. So it helps their self-esteem to actually feel a part of connection, even in their mistakes. And then it also empowers them to hear a new way.
Yeah. And the cool thing is that the fruit of this is our kids take ownership very easily. Both of them, including our autistic daughter.
Really cool. Wow.
Like if we confront them and say, even if we don't, a lot of times they'll come back. Moses will come back and say, Mom, I'm really sorry. I was really overwhelmed.
They're not difficult to get an apology out of.
No, not at all.
And some kids will. I don't know if you've ever encountered this, but some kids do not apologize.
And we had another kid along with us recently, and he, did a couple things and I had to correct him, and he immediately would go to defensiveness or shut down. And I realized I'm like, oh, okay, he needs some of this modeled a little bit for him because he doesn't know how. But the fruit of it really is both of our kids easily come back, easily take ownership for things because it feels safe. And because humanity is about like, hey, we see your humanity. We get it. It's okay.
Yeah.
Well, and forcing your kids to apologize is what a lot of parents do. And that creates a lot of weird psychology for people for the rest of their lives. Well, and they avoid taking ownership, and they separate, they dissociate in order to just get through it. And then they sometimes learn to lie to make other people feel better instead of just, if you model it, don't force your kids to apologize. If you model it, they are watching you, and that's how they're learning.
Yeah, I was thinking how like I was, often forced to go apologize, but I'm like, I never once got an apology. From certain
Well, that's
people.
what I was going to say. Most kids have never heard their parents apologize.
Exactly.
And so that's what's modeled for you. So you get into conflict as an adult and you don't know how to. You're not going to do that.
Yeah.
That's not going to be natural to you.
I mean, I was thinking that even just listening to what you guys said to your kids, I was like, oh my God, what would it be like to have parents that like modeled ownership like this? This is so beautiful.
Well, and what would it be like to come into marriage?
Feeling comfortable
with apologizing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And taking ownership and being comfortable with your humanity and not having shame for it,
Yeah. And believing it's normal to have those things, but we can want to do better.
Yeah.
It really reinforces, hey, we're all, like we said, we're human, we're messy, and we're learning how to navigate that messiness, and that's okay. So good. So anyways, jumping back into, you guys got back into the car.
Oh yeah. So we get back in the car.
We take ownership. We
take ownership
repair.
With our kids.
We tell them we wish we could have done this differently. We go over it. We always end by saying, are you okay? Is there anything that you need to hear from us? Does your heart feel safe?
That's real good.
We put on Pietze's 90s alt rock mix, I'm pretty sure, at some point in there. I think there was some 311 at one point.
We needed a little energy boost. And we're like, we're going to have we did a sing along. We're going to have a great afternoon. So we get into Vegas.
We show up at the hotel, and our daughter, it's really high stakes going swimming. She loves swimming at hotels. We show up at the hotel that I've called in advance to make sure that their pool is working, and their pool's not working. And it's not warm outside, but most of the pools in Vegas are outdoors. And this was the only one we could find. This was like the only
indoor pool we could find in Vegas. It's broken. Our daughter's going to have a meltdown.
But I will say something in the next portion of this story that snapped in both of us, and I think it's so crucial to regulation, is there comes a point where you can actually choose out of dysregulation, where it's almost like you come out of your body and you're seeing the situation from a third point of view.
A bird's eye view. Well, yeah, you can learn the actual logic when you can recognize what's happening. It actually brings the blood flow back to your executive function, so you can make a choice to keep that one foot in safety and get regulated.
Yeah. So we literally walk across the parking lot to the hotel right next door, get a room. They have an outdoor pool that's freezing, and Pietze and I looking at ourselves, and we say we're going to go swimming with our kids.
We're going to get in that cold pool. It's literally now at this point like 9:30 at night. 55 degrees outside, 9:30 at night, and we're like, we're getting in that pool because our kids need it. Because our kids had a really rough day, and we know that we need to fill their bank account back up. And we need a moment of connection with them.
That's sacrificial.
It was
and not put them in the pool. Not to be clear, not put them in the pool, and we're gonna sit on the side and play on our phones, right? Like
totally.
They need to hear. And I think this goes to a biological level, but on the back end of dysregulation, your kids need to hear the sound of your laughter. They need to feel the physical touch of you holding them. You know, there's
so good.
a really real aspect to this. So we swam, and we
jumped
laughed,
in the cold pool.
Played.
We laughed. We had races, and
life was good. Life was so good. We get up to our hotel room, get the kids in bed.
One of the things we did is we're like, we're going to splurge on this hotel room and get a second bedroom so that we can have sex, because we haven't had sex in a really long time.
And that will help us regulate.
And and we're going to reset. And we were having this like awesome time.
Foreplay was great. Things were chugging along smoothly. And
go ahead with the details. We're ready.
Like, you got to go get condoms because we can't have another kid. You know? And so I go out to get him out of the suitcase. And Moses staggers out of bed. He's asleep, you know. He looks me right in the face and projectile vomit everywhere.
All over the hotel room, the curtains, the carpet, his sister who was sleeping next to him, the couch, himself, his hair, the clothes that we brought. It was projectile vomit like Exorcist style.
It was so bad.
So literally he walks in, and he goes, we're not having sex. And I was like, what happened? He's like, Moses just threw up everywhere. And we proceeded to stay up until 4 a.m. cleaning up throw up. But
the regulation stayed there. That's the thing, is that we stayed regulated because we had gotten to this point where we were outside of the situation. We're like, this is so ridiculous.
We're going to laugh about it.
We're going to laugh about it. We're going to be fine. This is just
and we're not going to turn on each other in this, and we're going to create like safety for each other.
And there is an acceptance that happens when you actually realize there's nothing you can do. Like we are in a hotel.
Instead of resisting, I should have the perfect night. We need to have sex. Yeah. That's the one thing that I need in order for me to be okay. Yes. Yeah. I can't regulate unless we have time to connect. Yeah. The acceptance is this is happening.
Yeah, we're in a hotel in Vegas. Moses is puking everywhere. We're supposed to be at Disneyland the day after tomorrow. We don't even know if we're going to be healthy enough at this point to do it. We have no idea what tomorrow holds. there's no point in freaking out about this because there's literally nothing we can do.
We have this phrase that we say to each other, some things cannot be helped. And we just look, some things cannot be helped. And we just took our forks and started cleaning up throw up out of the I'm not even kidding you.
Oh,
so anyways, the moral of that story really is that, you know, your messiest moments can actually become the biggest keys to creating safety with your kids. And you're really, the key to even dysregulating a child is understanding first how to get regulated yourself, how to see them as mirrors, how to recognize even the unsafety that's happening inside of them and de-escalate their nervous systems.
Well, and one thing I will say for those of you who were raised in the church and parenting in the church, there are not very many verses in the Bible about the way that kids and parents relate. There's a few, but there's not a lot. And I think that the very black and white view of parenting inside of the church oftentimes is because we're just looking at the verses that talk about parenting. But the truth is, there's a lot of verses in the Bible about how to treat all humans.
One another.
Right.
And all of those verses apply to your wife, and all of those verses apply to your kids or your husband.
So good,
you know?
Johnny.
And
if you're not weighing those other verses in context of even, you know, the whole scripture about love is patient, love is kind. You know, if you're not
suffering.
Yes. If you're not weighing that in, you will go into it with a very authoritative view, but not have a full picture of what it looks like to actually raise a whole brain child, you know, that feels safe and secure.
And even circling back to what Abby was talking about all the way at the beginning of the podcast, you know, there's nothing more regulating than the heart of God. You know what I mean? And so in those moments when you're in dysregulation with your kids, like just recognizing the heart of God should be coming out of me towards them. Like that's the goal. The goal is that I would love this child the way that I would hope that God would love me in my messiest moments. You know, the way that I wish that my parents would have loved me in my messiest moments.
Well, and even that is if you just take the time to think through, because I'm listening to you and I'm like, I can't think of one kid that doesn't have a road trip horror story from their childhood.
Totally.
100%.
It would be what I'd imagine. And so I'm like, just that time to be like, okay, what was it like for me when I was in that? And what would I have wanted from the people around me? Just the empathy of that creates humility.
Yeah. When my dad yelled at me, what would I have wanted him to come back and say to me afterwards? Like those kind of questions are the questions you need to be asking yourself if you want to regulate at home.
So true.
This is so good. This has been really good.
There's one last thing I just want to say that you guys are doing that I want to call out. Confirmed reality is really regulating.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And this is one of the things that most humans struggle with. They feel things in their childhood, but it never gets talked about. It never gets acknowledged. It never gets explained. It never gets. And so you are left spinning, trying to make sense of chaos that you don't understand. And every kid blames themselves for whatever the chaos they're experiencing. So the more you can explain reality and explain what's going on in reality to a kid, they feel safe. There's something inherent. Like, I feel so safe if somebody's like, even if somebody got mean towards me, but they're like, I just got mean towards you. Like, I feel instantly much more safe.
Yes,
because the reality is confirmed.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just that is such a huge key to creating a regulated childhood.
Well, and they're looking to you.
Family.
They're looking to you as an anchor, you know? And so not only just confirming their reality, I think we'll get into this in the session about anxiety, but you have the ability to tell them what they need to even believe about the situation, right?
Right.
So there are times even where the regulation is out of control, like you're really dysregulated, out of proportion to the situation, and even you coming in and bringing reality of telling them this moment doesn't have to be traumatic. This is what's actually happening. How can I help you? Right? Sometimes the moment is saying that what they need you to say in the moment is, your reality is right. This is pain is really hard. Other times what they need you to tell them is it's going to be okay. Yeah, this isn't as bad as you're feeling.
Well, it's not that your emotions are the reality.
Right.
The reality is mom and dad were fighting and that's stressful. It's not saying the level of emotion you have is reality.
Right. And and I'm just saying, like, even what we talk about in Pathways, where you're going back to your core beliefs from childhood, you're recognizing in that moment, if you're aware, I have the ability to help them walk away from this situation with the right belief.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. And sometimes over validating can go telling them this situation is scarier than it even, right.
And so you don't need
especially for kids. Yeah. Sometimes, you always want to validate your kids' feelings, always, because you want to confirm their reality and let them know, that that's really safe. But sometimes that over validation can then become dysregulating. It can wind them up where they get stuck. And it's always about moving the kid through the emotion.
Which we are going to have a whole episode on, and we're going to pause right there.
Yep.
Because this is the end of this one.
Yeah.
And it's a good cliffhanger. People need to learn, how do I regulate my family without causing them more chaos?
Yeah.
And so the next episode will be on working with kids and learning how to work with them through anxiety.
Yeah.
And the journey of how to be with them so they feel less safe, how to help them overcome fear, and how to challenge them and know what they're capable of inside of that. I think it's going to be, I just feel like this whole series is powerful.
Yeah, it really is. And, I thank you guys for sharing. And to all of our listeners out there, we're going to give you a little snippet from one of our celebration phone calls from the Pathway to Freedom, where we sat down with everybody and we get to hear about some of their experiences and stuff. And this short snippet's going to give you a really good perspective from someone else who's actually been through it. And you get to kind of get a taste of that and see if that's something you want to partake in. So with that said, again, I love you guys. I'm glad we got to have this conversation.
I love you.
And I'm glad I don't have a kid vomiting on me.
Yeah, I'm glad that you don't.
During sex.
All right. Without further ado, here's that celebration phone call conversation.
I love Pathway, and it's been so helpful for me. My entire childhood, I felt so tormented and I just felt so crazy. It felt like every day, I remember like for a season, just every day, even as a little kid, like telling my family, like almost like yelling at them, like something's wrong. As a teenager, like I lost my teenage years because I had such bad complex PTSD. It completely shut me down, and I felt like crazy for so many years. And like I just feel like I lost my childhood, and there's so many years of that, like just chronic pain over and over again, of like deep isolation. But the most maddening thing about it was just not having language. And like I feel like I'm drinking water for the first time. Like someone is actually talking about this. Like finally someone's like freaking talking about this. And just to think about the way that my life could have stayed in the way that it is now, like it's such a miracle for me. Like I don't even know if I could ever fully express to anyone how much of a miracle it is. Like if they knew my life, they knew how locked up, how trapped I was. And I'm like, God always saw me. God always was preparing a resource for me where he knew what my heart wanted. And he brought me into a future where I get to live the life I actually wanted. Like it's more than I wanted. And I didn't even know was possible. And I just like, I'm so thankful for your guys' voice and for you doing this and for you like not giving up and for you just having the courage to like believe that there is more, because even beyond all your resources and all your materials that are so good and so profound, it's like me being able to encounter your guys's like will of life, just to be like, I will listen to that like ache that feels so hard to listen to sometimes when you're deeply frustrated at the world around you or your connection with humanity, and I will dig in and find something different. Like that's the way I want my life to be. Like it felt so validating to find someone who believed in that same will to live, I guess. Thank you. Like it's been so deeply impactful for me, and I'm just so incredibly grateful for it. It's really, really affected me, and it means so much to me.